Today's presentation is brought to you by the letter C and the number 11. Okay, you probably shouldn't say today, and you probably shouldn't say today's presentation when you're giving a speech. However, I wanted to let you know that today is one of my favorite days. This is one of my favorite chapters, one of my favorite things to teach in public speaking. Outlining the speech. Yeah, I know. People think it's kind of weird, but it's actually one of my favorite things to teach because usually during class, I bring cookies for everybody. I do have a cookie, like I mentioned, borrowed from Sesame Street and my friend Dr. Mims. Today's episode is brought to you by C for Cookie and the number 11 because we are covering Chapter 11 in Dr. Stephen Lucas's The Art of Public Speaking, 13th edition. Why the cookie? I'll get back to it. For now, let's take a look at outlining the speech. First, you want to do a preparation outline. Sometimes I call these the rough draft outline. The preparation outline is a detailed outline developed during the preparation of the speech. In other words, it's your first draft. It's a copy. It's what you plan to say in your speech. A preparation outline should include the title, the specific purpose, the central idea, an introduction, main points, subpoints, connectives, conclusion, and bibliography. But this is just a rough draft, so it doesn't have to be perfect just yet. You may not use all the sources in your first bibliography. Your central idea might change, or your introduction and conclusion might be different. But you should always have a rough draft. Why, as a public speaking instructor, do I collect the rough draft? Well, because I want to know that you've worked on it for more than just a few minutes. Preparation outline guidelines, according to Dr. Lucas, is to state the specific purpose, identify a central idea, label your introduction, body, and conclusion, use a consistent pattern of symbolization and indentation, state your main points and subpoints in full sentences, label transitions, internal summaries, and internal previews, attach a bibliography, and provide a title. This sort of sets the visual framework for your speech. You have symbolization and indentations showing the relationship among ideas. That's what makes it an outline. As it shows here, you have a main point, subpoints, and sub-subpoints. Another main point, subpoint, subpoint. For me, I'm not as concerned if you have an A and a B, a 1 and a 2. What I really want to know is, when you're giving the speech, have you balanced things out? A bibliography, works cited or reference page, is a list of sources used in the speech preparation. And then you will also cite them orally during the speech itself. A speaking outline is one of the outlines that comes next. I also have my students do a formal outline, but the speaking outline is a brief outline used during the presentation of a speech. There are public speaking instructors, I'm sure, who allow their students to use sheets of paper to speak from, maybe sheets of paper backed with construction paper, or so on and so forth. I do not allow that. I want my students' speaking outline to be in the form of note cards. Specifically, I ask for white 3x5 note cards. There's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, note cards are far less distracting than paper. If you have a sheet of paper and you're nervous, that paper is going to start making noise. If you have note cards, even if you're nervous, it won't be that obvious. A side note though, if you're going to use note cards, write them in pen or print them out on your computer. The reason for that is because you don't want to get too nervous and have them written in pencil and then smudge them up by rubbing them together or touching your face and having graphite, aka lead, all over your face from the smudged up note cards. So write your note cards, your speaking outline, in pen, and do yourself a favor. I have my students use white 3x5 note cards because then everybody has the same standard. You all have the same amount of space to write in. And a white note card is not super distracting like some of the neon yellow, neon green, neon pink note cards can be. So in your speaking outline, you'll want to have a visual framework that you've gotten from the preparation outline. You want to make it legible, like I said. Use pen if possible. Keep the notes brief, and then include delivery cues. So this might be where you would number those note cards. Say you have 5 note cards. Number them 1 through 5, just in case you drop them or they get mixed up. You might also say, this is where I want to change my PowerPoint slide, or this is where I wanted to show something to the audience. These are delivery cues. You can also remind yourself to smile, make eye contact, and look around the room. Delivery cues are the directions for delivering the key parts of a speech. Unfortunately, that's all Dr. Lucas had to tell us. That's because he included some of the other information last time. I'm going to include some more information on organizing and outlining this time. Let's take a look at an outline from a textbook that I used to teach out of. This outline comes from the workbook portion, which I helped to work on. It is Dr. Deanna Salnow's public speaking textbook. I believe it's the Fundamentals of Public Speaking, but this outline actually comes from that textbook. I've just used it for a lot of years. I helped contribute to it, and I call it Heidi's How to Get an A outline. But citing proper sources, right? So in this outline, we have the introduction, which I spoke about earlier, and the conclusion, which I also spoke about in an earlier video. You can see here, just like Dr. Lucas had it, there's an introduction, and it includes the attention catcher, listener relevance, speaker credibility, thesis statement, and a preview of main points. I might even be able to make this just a little bit bigger so you can see it a little bit better. Let's change the size of the text here to maybe just a little bigger so that you can see it a little better. Okay. So remember, we talked about catching the attention of the audience, the attention catcher, listener relevance, telling your speakers your audience why they should be interested in what you have to speak about. Your speaker credibility, why do you know more than the audience does? In this case, it might just be because you researched the topic. A thesis statement is a 1-sentence summary of your speech. It's a declarative sentence. In other words, a thesis statement might be something like, let's explore the history of the Denver Broncos. Yes, they're my favorite football team. And then our preview of main points might be, let's discuss the early years of the Denver Broncos, the years when they won their most Super Bowls, and their seasons following the Super Bowls. That would be my least favorite part. But then we have our main points. Our first main point, remember, about the Denver Broncos was their early years. They actually started in about 1960 with some really ugly uniforms, but they did well. I can provide that in the supporting points and the sub-supporting points. Then I will transition. I can transition from talking about their first years as the Denver Broncos into the years when they won Super Bowls. I could talk about the Super Bowls won in the first supporting point and subpoints, and then the second supporting point and subpoints. And I could talk about Super Bowl appearances and wins with John Elway and Super Bowl appearances and win with Peyton Manning. And then I could talk about some of the disappointment and disappointing years we've had recently, and that would be my third main point. I could provide supporting points and sub-supporting points to support this as well. The last thing then would be the conclusion, where I would explain that I have shared with you some of the history of the Denver Broncos. We've discussed their time when they started out in the 1960s. We've discussed the Super Bowl wins that they had in the 90s and 2000s. And we've discussed their most recent experiences in the NFL. I would restate my thesis. We have explored the history of the Denver Broncos. And then I would have a clincher that would be similar to my attention catcher. I didn't give you an attention catcher example, but my clincher might be to send you away with, hopefully we will see improvements from John Elway and Peyton Manning's football team. Go Broncos! That would definitely be a clincher. That would help draw people in and they would remember what my presentation was about. As you can see here, if I was giving a speech, it's already broken up into 5 minutes and 5 note cards. I could do a minute to 30 seconds on the introduction, a minute to 2 minutes on the first main point, a minute to 2 minutes on the second main point, a minute to 2 minutes on the third main point, and a minute to 30 seconds on the conclusion. I would also then have 5 note cards. This is where the cookie comes in. When you're giving a speech for your audience, it's important to remember that they can't go back and read things like they can with a paper. So this outline is very similar to the 5-paragraph essay you probably heard about in English class. But listeners can't go back and reread information. So you need to prepare it for them well. You need to have an introduction and a conclusion that are similar, like the parts of the cookie here, the Oreo cookie. And then you need to provide them with the good stuff. That's what's in the middle. Introduction, body, and conclusion. You package it up in a nice little sandwich for your listeners. This will help them to remember your message a lot longer. Plus, if you talk about an Oreo cookie in class, you get to eat one.